The lake house hadn't changed. Same heavy cedar chairs, same polished oak table that my father refused to replace, same soft jazz humming from the old speaker in the corner like it always did during the holidays, since I was 12. Mom had made her signature roasted squash. Dad carved the turkey with the kind of precision that still reminded everyone he used to be a surgeon. For a moment, I almost convinced myself things were fine. Normal, familiar. Then, as he passed me the mashed potatoes, my father looked up and smiled. "So, has the $2,500 a month helped with rent and everything?" The fork slipped from my hand. My brain tried to catch up, but all I could manage was a blink. What money? It wasn't even a whisper. More like a breath, like the words had fallen out of me before I could hide them. A pause. Then everything went quiet. Even the jazz felt distant, like someone had turned the dial just a little. My father's smile fell. His eyes flicked toward Mom. She didn't meet them. I don't understand, I said, slower now. My voice cracked on the last syllable. I haven't gotten anything. Elena? Dad's voice was sharp. Not angry. Just strained. Not yet. Mom dabbed her lips with a napkin. Then she set it down gently beside her plate. I thought it would be better used elsewhere, she said. Better used? He repeated, louder. You told me you'd handle the transfers. I did, she replied simply. To who? His voice cracked. I could hear the heat rising. She reached for her water, but I noticed her hand trembled. Delaney's program is more expensive, she said. She needs it more. You know how hard it is to break into fashion. It's competitive, unforgiving. And Elena is what? Dad's voice shook now. Supposed to survive on scraps while our other daughter sips cocktails in Miami? Benjamin, she tried to warn, but he cut her off. No, he said. I need to know. For how long? She exhaled. Since last June. Dad turned to me, and the look on his face broke something inside me. Elena, you've had nothing? No transfers? No support at all? I shook my head. I asked once, I said. Mom told me there wasn't anything left after tuition. His shoulders dropped. He looked like he'd been punched. I thought you were okay, he whispered. I've been working nights, I said. Tutoring, diner shifts, skipping meals. But sure, I'm fine. Mom's chair creaked as she stood. Don't do this here. It's Thanksgiving. Dad didn't move. He just kept looking at me, like he was finally seeing me for the first time in a very, very long time. No one spoke. Even the jazz seemed to fade into the background like the house itself was holding its breath. My mother didn't sit back down. She hovered near the table, smoothing the front of her sweater as if that could somehow straighten out the mess she'd just unraveled in front of us. Dad leaned back in his chair slowly, like his body suddenly felt heavier than it had 5 minutes ago. You told me, he said, quieter now. You were taking care of it. Every month. I was, she said, her voice clipped, controlled. Just not the way you assumed. To who? He asked again. To Delaney? She didn't flinch. She needed help, she said. Her internship didn't pay, and there were travel costs, portfolio fees. She had meetings in LA and Miami. Things you don't just walk into, Benjamin. He looked like he was trying to understand, trying desperately to make the math add up in his head. And Elena? He asked, motioning toward me. Did she not need to eat? Did she not need rent? Books? Heat in the winter? Mom's jaw clenched. I didn't think she'd need as much. She always manages. The word manages hit me harder than I expected. Like all the nights I skipped dinner had been a personality trait. Dad's gaze darkened. You didn't ask. You just decided. She was always independent, Mom said softly, stronger. And you punished her for that. That shut her up. For a moment, at least. The room felt tight, like the walls were shrinking inward. I couldn't stay seated anymore. I pushed my chair back slowly, careful not to let it scrape too loud against the tile. I need some air, I said. No one stopped me. The hallway was too quiet, too familiar. Family photos lined the walls. My fourth grade spelling bee picture. A Christmas morning where I was the only one not looking at the camera. Outside, the lake was still, cold. Bare trees reflected in its surface like broken veins. I pulled my jacket tighter around me. Inside that house, something had cracked wide open. And for the first time, I wasn't the one pretending it hadn't. The fall semester blurred together. I had stacked my schedule so tight there wasn't a single white square left on my calendar. Organic chemistry lab at 8 a.m., tutoring freshman biology in the afternoons, double shifts at the diner every Friday and Saturday night. I told myself it was temporary, just until I caught up, just until I made rent, just until I could breathe. Most mornings I skipped breakfast. Lunch was a protein bar between buildings. Dinner, if you could call it that, was instant noodles or whatever was left over at the diner after closing. On good days, I got half a grilled cheese. On bad days, I just drank water and hoped it would shut my stomach up. My sneakers had started to split at the soles. I stapled them back together in the break room once, hiding behind a mop bucket so my manager wouldn't see. I told no one, not because I was proud, but because explaining it felt worse than enduring it. Then came the collapse. It was a Friday night. The place was packed. Music blaring, drinks sloshing, couples laughing in booths. I was carrying a tray of beers to table 9 when my vision went soft around the edges. Heat spread through my chest. The floor tilted. And then, nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was staring at a ceiling painted sterile white. There was a soft beep near my ear, an IV in my arm. I blinked once, twice, trying to remember where I was. "You fainted," the ER nurse said gently. "Probably from exhaustion. When was your last full meal?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Later, my shift manager told me he'd called my parents after the ambulance came, left 3 voicemails. "No answer," he said. "Figured they'd show. They didn't." 2 days later, someone knocked on my apartment door. It wasn't family. It was Jonah, my lab partner. He stood there holding a plastic bag of groceries and a foil pan of baked ziti. "I heard through the grapevine," he said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "You look like you're disappearing." I sat on the edge of my bed, legs folded, hoodie pulled tight around me like armor. "I'm fine," I said. He didn't argue, just handed me a plate, pulled up my desk chair and sat across from me. I took a bite. It was warm and cheesy and real. I had to press my tongue to the roof of my mouth to keep from crying over a stupid forkful of pasta. That night, I slept for 12 hours straight. The next morning, I checked my phone. 2 messages from Mom. First, "Glad you're doing okay. Can you send Delaney the name of that skincare brand you liked?" Second, "Don't forget to eat." I stared at them for a while, then deleted both. Later that week, Delaney posted a video from some rooftop brunch in West Hollywood. Champagne flutes. Buttered croissants. Her face lit by filtered sunlight. The caption read, "No better way to start the day. Thanks, Mom." I watched it twice, not because I cared, but because I couldn't not. And for the first time, something inside me didn't just ache. It cracked. Delaney's world didn't look real, at least not from where I was sitting. I watched her stories in silence. Smooth transitions, curated captions, soft jazz behind scenes of rooftop lounges and designer boutiques. One clip showed her laughing as she leaned over a balcony, champagne glass in hand, city lights glittering behind her. The caption said, "Mom always knows what I need. Brunch, life, style. Gifted." I muted the sound and locked my phone, then set it face down on the floor beside the mattress. My ceiling had started peeling again. The mini fridge in the corner rattled like it was trying to keep itself alive. I hadn't bought a fresh vegetable in 3 weeks. A month ago, I'd emailed Mom asking if she could help cover the cost of a new anatomy atlas. Mine was falling apart. Pages missing, water stained from an overnight cram session, and a knocked-over cup of coffee. She responded the next morning. "That's a luxury, Elena. You'll have to make do." 2 days later, Delaney posted a photo of her new Balenciaga boots. Thanks to my amazing mom for always supporting the dream. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. Just hollow. It was like something inside me had stopped trying to justify the imbalance. Like whatever part of me had once thought, maybe she doesn't realize, had finally gone still. I didn't want anything fancy. I just wanted to stop rationing Tylenol. I picked up my phone again, opened my banking app. Nothing. Then, without really thinking, I pulled up her number. Delaney. We hadn't spoken on the phone in months. Our conversations were always texts now. Short ones, surface level, usually one-sided, mine. My thumb hovered over the call button. Then I pressed it. She picked up on the second ring. Iris? Wow, you never call. Everything okay? Yeah, I lied. Just wanted to check in. It's been a while. She laughed, soft and breezy, just like always. You miss me? Sure. My voice came out thinner than I meant. She started rambling about a recent shoot in Pasadena, the stylist she didn't like, how almond milk was sold out at her favorite cafe. I let her talk. I counted the unopened bills on my desk. Eventually, I asked, how do you manage it all? I mean, financially, LA isn't cheap. Oh, she said, casual. Mom handles it. She wires me $3,500 a month, sometimes more if I've got a campaign or travel. My mouth went dry. That's great. She just gets it, you know? She always says it's about investing in the dream. Right. Anyway, she asked how classes were. I barely heard myself respond. When the call ended, I sat frozen, staring at my reflection in the window. I looked pale, smaller, like something had been peeled back. Then I opened my laptop. Found the cheapest seat home for Thanksgiving. 2 layovers, 6-hour delay. Didn't matter. I booked it. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say when I got there, but I knew one thing for sure. The table I'd be sitting at this time would never feel the same again. The flight was delayed 3 hours, then 2 more. By the time I stepped out of the airport in New Hampshire, the cold slapped me like it was personal. Dad picked me up in silence. No radio. Just the faint hum of the heater and the squeak of the windshield wipers cutting across sleet. His jaw was tight the whole drive, his fingers white around the steering wheel. Back at the house, everything looked untouched. Perfect. Like time had been curated. Like pain couldn't live in polished wood and framed photos. We sat at the kitchen table. Sunlight poured through the same windows I used to press spelling tests against, waiting for Mom's praise. She made lentil soup and chicken salad. Nothing extravagant, but more than I'd had in weeks. I forced down 2 bites, then set my fork aside. Dad glanced up. You've lost weight. I shrugged. I guess. You okay? Define okay, I said. He frowned. What do you usually eat? Instant noodles, discounted sandwiches, leftovers from work, if I'm lucky. He paused, eyes narrowing. Is the $2,500 not covering enough? I looked at him. He wasn't being sarcastic. He really didn't know. There were no transfers, Dad. Not one. His fork slipped and clattered against the plate. He turned to Mom. Margot? She kept her eyes on her bowl. Silence stretched until it felt unbearable. I've been sending it to Delaney, she said at last. Her voice was calm, practiced. She needs it more. Dad's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She's in fashion, Ben. It's expensive. She has events, people to meet. She needs to maintain a certain image. I blinked. And I don't need to eat? Mom looked at me, startled like she'd forgotten I was still in the room. I'm not saying you don't need help, she said carefully. I just thought, you're stronger. You always manage. Delaney is more sensitive. Dad stood up, slow and stiff. You told me you were sending it to Elena. You let me believe she was fine. She is fine, Mom said louder now. She always is. Dad looked at me again. This time it wasn't shock. It was guilt. I pushed my chair back. I came here for answers, I said. I didn't expect them to be so simple. I started down the hallway. I didn't expect anyone to follow me. But later that night, Dad knocked. I didn't answer. Still, he opened the door, slowly, like he wasn't sure he had the right. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "I keep going over it. She told me she was sending it every month. I thought you were okay. Comfortable. Safe." I stayed quiet. He sat on the edge of the bed. "You remember when Delaney got her car?" he asked. I nodded. "I got a maybe next year." He exhaled through his nose like the memory tasted bitter now. "She told me you didn't mind." "I did," I said simply. He nodded, slowly. "This summer, you asked about that medical internship in Maine. I said we couldn't afford it. You said you wanted to save money instead." I cried for a week, I admitted. "Delaney went to Italy that month." He looked away. "She always said you were independent, that you didn't need as much, that you'd find a way." "She wasn't wrong," I said. "I did find a way." Then I looked at him, really looked at him. I just shouldn't have had to. His jaw tightened. "This isn't about strength, Elena. It's about fairness." And I missed it. For too long. Downstairs, their voices started rising again. Mom's was sharp, defensive. Dad's was lower, more cutting. "I trusted you," he said, "and you stole from our child." I turned my face toward the window. I didn't need to hear her answer. I already knew what it would sound like. The next morning, I found Dad in his study. His glasses were low on his nose, one hand pressed to his temple, the other scrolling slowly through something on his laptop. He didn't hear me step in at first. "Dad?" I said. He looked up like he'd forgotten I existed outside of the screen. "Elena," he said, voice tight. "I need you to know, I didn't just believe your mother blindly." I stayed in the doorway, silent. "I gave her access," he continued, "to your joint trust. The one your grandfather left for you and Delaney, split evenly." My breath caught. "I thought it was locked until you turned 25. I assumed it was untouched." He turned the screen toward me. A list of bank transfers filled the spreadsheet. Line after line, each tagged with an account ending in numbers I didn't recognize. But apparently she's been diverting funds for nearly 2 years now, into a separate account, in Delaney's name only. I took a step closer. "How much?" He hesitated, then answered anyway. 280,000. My knees felt unsteady. Not shock exactly, just confirmation. Like finally putting a name to something I'd only felt in shadows. "She made it look like school-related expenses," he said. "But it's all personal. Rent in Miami, spa visits, designer labels, flights. I saw a withdrawal labeled networking gala for $15,000. I swallowed hard. "What now?" "I've already contacted the attorney," he said. "We're freezing the secondary account. Starting proceedings to reverse the unauthorized transfers. It won't be fast." I nodded. That was all I could do. Downstairs, I heard the floor creak. Then Mom's voice, sharp, controlled, frustrated. "You didn't even ask me," she said. "I did what I thought was right." Dad's voice followed, quieter but firmer. "That money was for both our daughters." "She needs it more," Mom snapped. "I did what was best for her." He didn't yell, he didn't raise his voice. But the next thing he said cracked through the walls like ice splitting under weight. "And who was protecting Elena?" I stood at the top of the stairs, listening. "Iris is fine," Mom said, that same dismissive calm she'd always used. "She's always been fine." Dad was quiet for a long time. Then he said it again, but softer. "You keep saying that like it justifies everything." She tried to speak, but he cut her off. "I just wanted the best for Delaney," she insisted. He shook his head. "And what did Elena get?" No one answered. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Dad on the phone with his lawyer. By the end of the week, he had filed for legal separation. The house felt different. Not angry, not even cold. Just quiet. Like something had cracked, and finally fresh air was getting in. Back in Boston, the air felt sharper, quieter, like the city didn't care who I was or what I'd been through. And for once, that felt like mercy. I dropped 2 of my shifts at the diner. The manager didn't argue. He just nodded and said, "You've looked like a ghost for months. Go sleep." I kept tutoring, though. Something about explaining mitosis to freshmen calmed me. It made the world feel ordered, clean, like things had rules I could count on. I started eating real meals, eggs, rice, a vegetable here and there. My grades went up, not because I suddenly got smarter, but because I wasn't running on fumes anymore. I could actually think. One night, I bought myself a new pair of sneakers. Not flashy, just warm, dry. They didn't squeak when I walked. And they didn't fall apart when it rained. It was the first time I'd bought something that didn't feel like a compromise. And somehow, that felt louder than any apology. Delaney started texting again. At first, it was shallow. "Are you okay?" Or, "Mom's kind of losing it, LOL." I didn't reply. Not right away. But then she sent a picture. A simple rack of dresses she'd sewn for a small boutique in Little Havana, hand-stitched, repurposed from thrifted fabric. "They're not designer," she wrote, "but they feel more like mine." I didn't know what to say, so I just wrote, "I'm glad." Then came the call. It was late. I was walking home from the library, the cold biting through my jacket. Her voice on the line was quieter than I remembered. "I think I finally see it," she said. "See what?" "What it cost you. All of it." There was a pause long enough to feel honest. "I didn't want to believe it," she admitted. "Because if I did, I'd have to admit Mom made it easier for me. And that meant she made it harder for you." I didn't say anything at first. I leaned against a railing and stared up at the sky. "I don't need you to feel guilty," I said finally. "I just don't want you to pretend it was fair." "I won't," she said. And for the first time in years, I believed her. Christmas came quietly. No grand gestures, no speeches, just an early flight, 2 carry-ons, and a quiet knock at the front door. Delaney and Dad went in first. I followed behind, slower, unsure. The house still smelled like cinnamon and pine, but it didn't feel the same. Maybe it never had. Mom answered the door in a faded gray sweater I didn't recognize. Her hair had more silver in it than last year. Her eyes looked tired in a way makeup couldn't cover. She smiled faintly. It didn't reach all the way. We sat around the same table where it all broke. The oak still gleamed, but it felt different now, like the air had shifted and never quite returned to what it was. Dinner was simple. Roasted vegetables, dry turkey, a store-bought pecan pie. No place cards, no matching napkins, no pretending. Delaney complimented the stuffing. Dad asked about my finals. Mom said she was still adjusting to retail hours. She'd taken a job at a home goods outside of town. No one brought up the past, but no one pretended it hadn't happened either. And that, I think, was the win. Later that night, I unpacked in my old room. The posters were gone. The paint had faded. I sat on the bed and pulled a white envelope from my bag. Inside was my paid tuition receipt. A symbol of something that should have been mine from the start, but I still earned twice. Once through labor, once through truth. I placed it in the top drawer, next to a folded note Dad had given me months earlier. It read, "This is yours not because you earned it, but because I finally saw you." I read it again, then closed the drawer gently. For a long time, I believed love had to be proven. That needing less meant being strong. That silence was survival. But I don't believe that anymore. I believe in being seen. I believe in listening, especially when it's uncomfortable. And I believe some stories don't end with healing. They begin with it.